also talking to our people, the Karashuna, to leave raiding activities and seek alternatives to generate wealth, primarily in agriculture-based businesses. That the Uganda and Kenya governments find the ways and means to solve the ongoing impasse related to solving problems involving the migration of pastoralists across borders. That the youth should continue to hand over guns, and that the government extends the amnesty period while pursuing the means to provide livelihood means to disarmed youth. That the Uganda People's Defense Forces continues deployment along conflict hotspots in Karamoja and across borders to protect lives and property. That the UPDF and civilian institutions initiate measures to establish a civil-military cooperation mechanism between security authorities and civilians. That the government comes up with a long-term strategy for Karamoja as a pillar of all growth and development, a long-term security strategy. That the UPDF, in collaboration with communities, increases its cattle recovery and return measures to curb revenge raids between communities. On the very important issue of water and grazing availability, utilization and rights, we have resolved as follows. That the Uganda Wildlife Authority smoothens through collaborative agreements the sharing of grazing resources within all conservation areas. That the Ministry of Water and Environment expedites the desiltation of valley tanks in the region and the construction of large water reservoirs in every district, especially water-stressed districts. That the pastoralists, local governments, and political leaders in Karamoja and neighboring districts resolved to undertake at Tamam the negotiation and implementation of grazing agreements in Karamoja and neighboring communities. That the government increases investment in motorization of boreholes as a responsible alternative to valley tanks in the grazing areas in Karamoja. On land-related conflict, we resolve as follows. The districts undertake measures to plan the utilization of land against increasing and competing land uses in Karamoja. That the Ministry of Lands strengthens coordination mechanisms with districts in Karamoja and promote the linkage to and utilization of zonal offices. That the government undertakes the translation of land documents and provision of these documents to communities in appropriate media. That the government undertakes the delineation of international and local borders to deal with tensions arising out of competition for service provision and administrative authority. In relation to wildlife-human conflicts, we resolve as follows. The government, through Uganda Wildlife Authority, local governments creates awareness on existing wildlife laws, including the new Uganda Wildlife Authority Act and regulations and the operations of the compensation fund. That the government further takes measures to curtail the destruction of gardens by large mammals, primarily elephants and buffaloes. For example, building pits, fences, and creating buffers between conservation and farming areas. That the government reviews revenue sharing agreements to ensure equitable benefit to communities in Karamoja from conservation activities. That the government puts on hold plans by the Ministry of Tourism to convert Pianupe Game Reserve into a national park. On the second thematic area under the KCE, resilience. We can achieve resilience in Karamoja if we focus on the following: food security, education and skilling, street children, control of alcohol, cross-border trade, economic growth, and addressing the issue of gender-based violence. On education, we resolve that the government implements a truly free and compulsory education in Karamoja, involving all children under the age of 15. That the government undertakes skilling of youth, including rural youth and young people who have dropped out of institutions of learning in intermediate and post-secondary levels. That government urgently reintroduces alternative basic education programs for Karamoja. Local governments pass respective bylaws and ordinances to enforce compulsory education in Karamoja, we resolve that the government prioritizes the development of boarding schools in Karamoja. On household food and nutrition security in Karamoja, we have resolved as follows: that the Ministry of Agriculture strengthens extension services to crop and livestock farmers in Karamoja, in particular through narrow scale up the introduction of drought-tolerant, disease-resistant and more nutritious crops. That the Ministry of Agriculture undertakes regular vaccination of livestock in Karamoja and support through legislation a law regulating and developing the services of community animal health workers. That the government urgently undertakes the restocking of pastoralists who have lost livestock to insecurity, also as a restitution measure. That the Ministry of Agriculture now tables in Cabinet the draft rangelands and pastoralism policy to govern the management and utilization of rangelands and enhance the protection of pastoralist production modes. In relation to the Karamojong street children, we have resolved as follows: that the local governments and leaders of Napak, Moroto, Kotido commit to reach out to parents to keep children at home. The Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, KCCA, and municipalities and districts undertake structured repatriation of children on the streets of cities and towns, while taking measures to restore and strengthen community social systems. That the government undertakes the establishment of transitional rehabilitation centers to provide psychosocial support, integrated extracurricular activities and services to orphans. In relation to alcoholism in Karamoja, we have resolved that the Uganda police urgently implements stringent measures to cut the supply to Karamoja of illicit alcohol. We further commit to sensitize our communities through institutions of governance, both formal and traditional, against the abuse of alcohol and distribution of dangerous drugs and other substances in our communities. That in the bid to increase business opportunities in Karamoja, government makes available through microfinance institutions to support business people involved in illicit alcohol business to create alternative income generation options. That the government further finds mechanisms to curtail distribution of these alcoholic products, including expanding the description of illicit products to alcohols packaged in plastic bottles. For example, on cross-border trade in the Karamoja region between the states of Uganda, Kenya, South Sudan and Ethiopia, we resolve that the governments of the region undertake to build peace in the region that continues to undermine trade and exchange, and fully implement the agreements in the current cross-border development MOU between Uganda and Kenya. That the local and developed governments take measures to promote informal trade and ease exchange amongst the pastoralists. That the government further develops infrastructure, mainly markets and roads, between cross-border communities, in particular the markets at Loima and Pire. On gender-based violence and child marriages, that development partners, the district local governments, increase community sensitization against negative cultural norms and practices through barasas with cultural, government and religious leaders. The districts pass relevant ordinances and bylaws to curb actions that undermine the rights of children and women in Karamoja. That the police strengthen the implementation of national laws relating to the protection of the rights of